Hi grade 12s and welcome to this video. In this video we're going to be working on KZN's Mathematics Paper 1 from September 2021. So we're only going to be working on question 2, which has these two questions. So let's go and start off with the first question. So they say the pth term of the first difference of a quadratic sequence is given by Tp is equal to 3p minus 2. Okay, so this is just the equation of the first difference of a quadratic sequence. So 2.1 says, determine between which two consecutive terms of the quadratic sequence the first difference is equal to 1450. So let's actually put what they're saying in a picture. So we have our quadratic pattern and it has a term 1, term 2, term 3, and I'm just going to stop at term 4 for now. And then we have our first difference, remember, which is an arithmetic pattern. And how we get this pattern is simply by saying term 2 of the quadratic minus term 1 of the quadratic, and then we'll get term 1 of the first difference. Likewise, we'll also say term 3 minus term 2 will give us term 2. And then term 4 minus term 3, that will give us term 3 in this pattern. Now, we have to determine between which two consecutive terms of the quadratic sequence that has a first difference equal to 1450. So between which two consecutive terms in the quadratic pattern will have a difference of 1450. So from this you can already see now that 1450 is a term. Okay, this is the value of a term in the first difference. And the good thing about this is they gave us the general formula of the first difference of this quadratic sequence. So we know what this pattern is. We know what the formula of this pattern is. So how about we find out which term exactly does this 1450 belong to in this first difference before we can find out which two terms in the quadratic pattern gave us this. Okay, so to find out which term exactly belongs to, or rather has the value of 1450 in the first difference, we can take the formula of it, which is Tp is equal to 3p minus 2, and then in place of Tp, which is our term value, we're going to put 1450. So 1450 is equal to 3p minus 2. And then if we take 2 over, we have 1452, because it's a negative 2, it becomes positive, is equal to 3p. And then we can go ahead and divide both sides by 3. And so our value of p is going to be equal to, if you say 1452 divided by 3, we get 484. So 484. So remember, TP is telling you which term, like T1 or T2. It's telling you the term number. That's what P is telling you. So it means that it's the 484th term in the first difference that has a value of 1450. So now we know this one is T 484. But the question here is determine between which two consecutive terms of the quadratic sequence, okay, that the first term will have this value. So they want to know between which two consecutive terms of this, okay, sequence, the quadratic part. So to be able to understand this, just look at the pattern that is going on here. If we say we want T1 of the first difference, we find T1 by saying term 2 minus term 1. That gives us term 1. And then if we want term 2, we find this by saying term 3 minus term 2, and that gives us term 2. And again, if we want term 3, we find this by saying term 4 minus term 3, and it will give us term 3. So in this case, if we have term 484, to find out which two terms are responsible for giving us this value, it will be term 485 minus term 484 that will give us this value. So now we know 1450 is found by saying the term 485, okay, minus term 484 of the quadratic pattern, because we can see now that in order to get the term number, okay, the two term numbers responsible for creating that difference, it's always going to be a case of whatever term value that you got here will be equal to, remember this is just in the first difference, will be equal to the term value that comes after it and the current term value that you have. That's why it was T485 minus T484. So the two terms that give you a first difference of 1450 is term 485 and term 484. Okay, now moving on to the next question, 2.2. They say the 40th term of the quadratic sequence is 2290 and Tn is equal to an squared plus bn plus c is the nth term of the quadratic sequence. Calculate the value of c. Okay, so clearly all we've been given in this question right now that we can see, we have been given the 40th term, okay, is equal to 2290. So we know that T40 is equal to 2290, and they told us that this is the equation for the quadratic pattern. Tn is equal to all of this. So what we can do first, or what your first instinct would probably be to take this and just, substitute term 40 into this equation. So Tn is equal to an squared plus bn plus c. And so in place of Tn, you could say T40. So it means that wherever you see n, you're going to substitute a 40. So a multiplied by 40 all squared plus b multiplied by 40 and then plus c. Okay. And also we know that T40 itself is equal to 2290. And so we can go ahead and simplify this. This is equal to a times 40 squared will give you 1600 and then multiply by a, so we still have a there, plus b times 40, that is just plus 40b, and then plus c. Now this is okay, but clearly it doesn't find the actual answer. We were looking for the value of c. This will only get us this far, and so a and b is still missing. So it means that there is some hint in this question for us to be able to find the value of a and b. And you can find it by doing this. So remember that our quadratic pattern basically looks like this. We have the quadratic, I'm just going to call that Q. That's term 1, and we have a term 2, 3, and 4. And then we also have our first difference. And we find that by basically subtracting these two. And so that will give us term 1 again, so term 2 and term 3. And then we have our second difference, which is constant, is a constant difference. And we basically find that by just saying term 2 minus term 1. And that will give us our second difference, and term 3 minus term 2. And basically, if you had the values of these three terms, okay, the first in the quadratic, first difference and second difference, you would be able to find a, b, and c. So possibly there is a hint in this question on how to find these. Now remember, apart from everything else, all they gave us was this pattern, the equation of the first difference of the quadratic sequence. So since they told us that Tp is equal to 3p minus 2, then that means we can actually find the first term in the first difference simply by substituting 1 as the first term. This is the formula itself for this pattern. So we can go ahead and find this term. And so T1 is equal to, so Tp equal to 3, in place of p we put 1 minus 2. And so T1 is equal to 3 minus 2, which gives us a 1. And so now we know, okay, this is actually equal to 1. So how about we just keep going and we find T2 so that we can find the difference. And so we can say T2 is equal to 3 bracket 2 minus 2. And so that's 6 minus 2, which is 4. And so we found out, okay, T2 is equal to 4. So if we want the value of D, we just have to say term 2 minus term 1. And that will give us 4 minus 1, which is 3. And so we can see, okay, now we know that D is actually equal to 3. Another way to see D is that you see that they've given you Tp is equal to 3p minus 2. In grade 9 and 10, this formula for the first difference, or for an arithmetic pattern, it was simplified to Tn is equal to Dn plus C, where we can clearly see that whatever is in front of n, that is going to be your difference. But then in grade 10 and 11, your formula looks like a plus n minus 1 times d. And the thing about this is, if you had numbers here and you simplified it, it would look like that. So now you can see that the coefficient of n is going to be your difference. That's why we have a 3 here and we had a difference of 3. That will always tell you what you keep adding by or subtracting by to get the next term. And that is in the first difference, of course. So that's another way to be able to find your difference, okay, your constant difference, is by looking at the coefficient of whatever n is, or in this case p, because we have TP. Okay, now that we have these, we can simply go ahead and equate them to the equations they're supposed to be equated to. So over here, the first term here is supposed to be equal to 2a. Okay, so 2a is equal to 3. And then here we have 3a plus b is equal to 1. And then on top we have a plus b plus c is equal to whatever this is, but we don't know what that is. So let's work with these two first. Okay, so we are just saying 2a is equal to 3. And so if you divide both sides by 2, a is equal to 3 over 2. And then to find b, we can say 3, and then in place of a, we're saying 3 over 2. And then plus b is equal to 1. And then we have 9 over 2 is plus b is equal to 1. B is equal to 1, and take 9 over 2 over minus 9 over 2. B is equal to 1 can be looked at as 2 over 2. So that's 2 minus 9, which is negative 7 over 2. And so we have A and we have B. And unfortunately, we can't find C by just substituting into here, because yes, we have A, we have B, but we don't know what this term is. So that will not help us. So what is probably going to help us is what they gave us at the beginning when they told us that T40 was equal to 2,290, and we substituted this into our quadratic equation. And as you can see in this quadratic equation, only A and B are missing. And so if we substitute those, we can find C. So let's go ahead and do that. And so this is the equation that we had. And we're going to go ahead and substitute A and B. So we have 2290 is equal to 1600 multiplied by 3 over 2 plus 40 multiplied by negative 7 over 2, and then plus C. So as this is, you can see we only have numbers all through here. So you can just go ahead and substitute all of that into the calculator. And there we go. If we put everything into the calculator, we get 2260. So 2260. And here we still have 2290 plus C. And so we can take this over. So we have 2290 minus 2260 is equal to C. So 2200 can cancel. And then we just have 90 minus 60, which is 30. So 30 is equal to C. And that's how we find our value of C. Okay, so this is something that you can also just keep in mind now, that if they ever ask you to find maybe even the Tn formula, maybe not just C, okay, and they ever give you the equation of the first difference, you can see that the 3, the coefficient of n or p or whatever variable they put there in place of n, okay, that will be your constant difference. And you can use that basically to find the first 2 or 3 terms if you want. The 2 terms is enough to be able to find the value of this, because this is all we needed. We just needed this first term, we needed that, and that was enough to basically find A and B. So that's it for this video. Have a good day and all the best for your prelims.